We've seen a journey of change for Family Life in terms of supporting people who use violence, and that for Family Life and for our communities it largely looks like men who use violence, because violence is still a gendered issue. We still see men using violence as the primary perpetrators against women and children. So in that journey of supporting our local community, who have increasingly called out for additional support around their experience, their lived experience of family violence, and through our work with children, where we can see the enormous impact on developmental issues, mental health issues for young people and children, we have really had to lift our game in terms of how do we support people who use violence. We were a really early adopter in this space. We started running men's programs over 20 years ago as an innovative initiative locally in terms of how we could support some of the men, the fathers who were coming through our local programs. And now 20 years later, sadly, the need for our service continues to grow and expand. From running just one group many years ago, we're now running well over 30 groups a week, and the demand for our service continues. One of the other things we are very passionate about as Family Life is early intervention. With our deep roots into local community, we see the early pathways into the use of violence for young boys, and we do believe that there can be a different experience. So Family Life is also invested in initiatives like the Healthy Masculinities work that we do, supporting partners in our local schools, having conversations around what does it safely mean to be a man, how can you be a great contributor to communities, how can you be a great father and build a generation of young Australian children that don't have trauma and violence as part of their childhood narrative.
For too long we've been treating men as one big homogenous group who just get the one-size-fits-all standard intervention, and there's no other population or cohort we do that with in the community sector. We're really attuned to diversity and inclusion and understanding that targeted interventions get better outcomes, and we employ that across the entire community sector, except when it comes to working with men who use family violence. So I think innovation's the only way through that. Success in the scope of working with men who use family violence ultimately looks like a reduction in male family violence, is the simplest way to quantify it. But we're really struggling to achieve that in a tangible manner when you look at the data. And maybe it's because we're underselling ourselves. I think it should be a reduction of the use of men's family violence against women and children in our communities, but it also should be an enhanced well-being of men in general. I think men's health needs to be part of the conversation as well, and the complexities that the contemporary Australian male's facing at the moment are nuanced, and they're being exacerbated at a level that I don't think we've seen for a while. And until we learn how to deal with those complexities, those social complexities, I think we're always going to struggle to get a reduction in the amount of male family violence that we currently see. I think place-based work is essential in this space. I grew up in Family Life's footprint, and every suburb and every area has its nuances and has its differences. And I think that really when we're talking about family violence, it's not a broad stretch of the imagination to rethink that and reimagine that, as we're talking about communities fundamentally and the health of our communities. And I think place-based interventions and place-based organisations are better placed than anyone to improve the welfare and well-being of our communities, which in turn should have flow-on effects to men's use of family violence within that same footprint.
A man that I started working with from the point of assessment, we had him come in for an assessment to determine whether or not he's suitable for the Men's Behaviour Change Program, and from that point he was quite resistant. There was very little ownership or acknowledgement of his use of family violence, and he really just kind of said that he was humouring the process and there was nothing really for him to gain other than to tick boxes and appease other people. And for us that's consistent with presentation quite often in that space. And so with that man, we soon transitioned him into the Men's Behaviour Change Program, and it was very, very quickly on that he would say things like, I didn't hit my partner, so I can't be here, I haven't done family violence. And then probably about 3 or 4 weeks in, we were delivering a session on intimidation and coercive control, and it was like his light bulb moment. And it really was the first time that he acknowledged that there was some family violence occurring at home and that there were things that he could be doing better, that there was some really unhealthy messaging that was being sent to his children, and he was not supporting his wife. And from that light bulb moment for him, that really saw a big shift. He did a 180 and there was a full acknowledgement of the ways in which he could have been better at home, and he also promoted and encouraged that in the other men. the other participants in the space as well. So what we saw was he really shifted away from being dismissive, resistant and denying his engagement in family violence to a real 180 and taking on board that accountability and the responsibility and promoting that amongst the other men, but also seeking feedback from his partner and his children to see how he could be better in that space.
I was working with a woman in Family Safety Contact. She had initially declined engagement. I had explained to her that I was there to listen to her stories without judgment and, where appropriate, offer support. Shortly after, she called me back and asked if we could just speak. From there, she told me her story, and over time we were able to work collaboratively and complete a comprehensive risk assessment together. It became clear that there were a number of evidence-based risk factors present for the client and her child, and her self-assessed level of fear was increasing. The rapport and trust that we'd built allowed me to facilitate some robust safety planning with the client that was tailored to her and her child's specific needs. I was also able to facilitate a referral to family violence case management to help support mitigation of some of the risks identified. I was also able to proactively share the risk-relevant information with the men's behaviour change facilitators to ensure that the person using violence was held in view and that the intervention was tailored to meet the needs of the family. A few months later, when it came time to close, my client reflected on how much her circumstances had changed over such a short period of time. She shared with me that she'd begun to feel safer and more secure in her home. She let me know how invaluable it had been to have someone walk alongside her, to have her story heard, and to feel like her concerns were valid.